Hi, I'm Jules.
And I'm Zak, and we're back with Life After Prison, Getting Out, your guide to life on the outside. In each episode, we discuss a different issue that you may face when you first get out. And today, we're talking about recovery. A lot of people come into prison with an addiction and begin their road to recovery inside. But when coming out, how do you continue on that journey?
So we have a voice clip from Chris, who is sharing his experience.
Hi folks, my name is Chris and I was released from prison on licence halfway through serving a 3 or 9 month sentence 5 years ago. I served time for a myriad of crimes not limited to arson, violence, burglary and theft. Like many of the lads that I met in there, unfortunately, addiction was at the root cause of my offending. I spent 18 months of my sentence working hard on myself to get clean and sober and, well, more mature and mentally prepared for the world. I didn't realise that I would be released homeless, told by my probation worker that it's not a crime to be homeless. The very first couple of hours, days or weeks after a prisoner's release are often the most vulnerable time, and we have a danger of falling back into old associations and old habits. I'm aware of AA and NA, but you know, some of us don't really ascribe to some of the more religious aspects of the 12 steps out there, and I was just wondering if you guys could offer me any help, if there are any additional groups that meet like AA and NA, but maybe without the religious or theistic aspects. And also if you guys would have any other additional tools and skills to help us going forward to, you know, remain clean and recovered. Thank you.
So thanks, Chris, for sending in that voice clip. We really appreciate you being open and honest with us, and want to say congratulations on your road to recovery. Long may it continue. So that brings us nicely to our guest today, who's John Finley from Humankind. So welcome, John. How you doing?
I'm really well, thank you.
Good. Please tell us a bit about yourself and what you do at Humankind, please.
So I'm the National Harm Reduction Lead for Humankind, which basically means that I have the privilege of helping deliver services for people who are perhaps still using drugs and heading towards recovery, and come up with strategies and new offers around how people can reduce their drug use and use drugs safer to make sure people are healthier and okay. And that's my main role. And I think listening to that clip there, it's really hard. Recovery and maintaining recovery is a really tough thing to do. It's one of those things that everyone thinks, I'm going to do it this time and I'll make sure that I don't go back into those old groups, mix with those old people. But that's really hard when you, like Chris was saying, you come out of prison and I'm homeless and the only people perhaps I know are the people who I used to be involved with drugs in before. So just to acknowledge just how hard it is to do that. So it's so good that he's doing that.
I'm glad you touched on that, because we have to understand it's not an easy thing. It's not like you flick a switch, right? So what would you say to someone who, like Chris, or anyone leaving prison who is in recovery? What advice would you give to them?
The first thing I'd say to anybody is make sure you've got Naloxone. So Naloxone is a medication that can reverse the effects of an opiate overdose.
Oh,
so
wow.
People who come out of prison in the first 2 weeks of coming out of prison are the most vulnerable group of people to an opiate overdose. And really sadly, we lose thousands of people every year to drug-related deaths. And nearly over half of those are related to opiate use. And so we've got this medication that everybody can carry, anybody can use, that can temporarily reverse the effects of an opiate overdose.
Wow.
So I would say to everybody, get a kit, because even if you don't need it, you might know somebody who does need that kit, or you might meet somebody on your journey that needs that kit. And I think the other thing then, in terms of that side of recovery, is it's about making sure you're around other people who are also wanting to be in recovery, and people who want to help you and support you, and not people that perhaps want you to go back into your old ways. And it's like I say, I recognise that it's just really, really tough, because a lot of the time when you've been in addiction, the only people you do know are the same people you knew before. And lots of the other people you knew before that who did help you, you've got a lot of bridges to build a lot of the time. And that can be tough as well, especially if you're struggling. I think for loved ones and for family members, if you're ever around somebody who's been in addiction, and you know, I class myself as being in recovery. I've used drugs in the past. All your loved ones around you are always watching, kind of on eggshells, waiting for things to happen, and that can put pressure on you at the same time.
So that can either make it. So, like you said, having that support system is vital, but also not having too much pressure put on the person who's in recovery, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think every treatment provider and Humankind as a treatment provider that I work for, you know, we're there at every stage of somebody's journey. So you might be drug free, and that's great, and we've got support and help for you there. You might be still using drugs, and we've got help and support for you there as well. So it's about reaching out, and it's also about knowing that actually saying I'm struggling is okay. And I think it's a really tough thing, especially if you're coming out of prison. So in prison, you've learned to put your armor on and not show vulnerability, because it's dangerous to show vulnerability in prison, or there's a perception that it's dangerous to show vulnerability in prison. And so you're used to having this, I'll be all right, I can cope mentality. And then actually turning around and saying to somebody, do you know what? I really feel like using drugs. That must, you know, it's really hard. But also for family members and people who are praying that you don't go back to using drugs. Someone says to you, I really feel like using drugs. Alarm bells are already ringing in your head. You already think they're already using drugs. Yeah. And then you start with the whole, you can't do this, you can't do that. And that can be really counterproductive. So it's about finding where in the recovery community your place is, or you fit into. And there's loads of different places and loads of different things that you can do. And I know that Chris said about he didn't really sign up to the AA kind of, or the NA kind of. I think it was some of the theological side of things that he felt about that. But there's a lot of those type of mutual aid meetings that aren't religious, and it's about supporting each other in the room and helping each other and holding each other in those really vulnerable times, so that you have got someone to ring to say, I'm really struggling, and somebody will say, well, why don't you come and have a cup of tea? Yeah. Rather than, well, I'll meet you in the pub, because that's not the right place to be if alcohol's the problem you've got.
Just to go back, John, quickly to the naloxone that you mentioned will really help people in someone like Chris's position, or Chris. Where can people get it, and how can they use it? What's the process?
So there's two versions of naloxone that's available at the moment. There's a nasal spray and there's an intramuscular injection, and every treatment provider in the country provides these. So if you were in an area where Humankind is the service delivery, you'd just turn up at one of our services and ask for a kit. We'd go through 15, 20 minutes of training on how to use it. It's really simple. I've got one in my bag today right here, because I carry it everywhere I go, no matter where I am. And then you carry it on you, and that kit will help save somebody's life. It is that simple. And so the nasal, so for example, if somebody is unconscious having used an opiate, and it only works on opiates, so heroin, codeine, methadone, those types of drugs. Okay. But somebody's unconscious, you go over to them, you administer the naloxone. So if it's a nasal spray, you literally, it looks like a little bit like the old Sinex sprays for kind of hay fever or decongestant.
Is it a one-time use thing? Yeah. Okay.
So there's two in the Nixoid packs, there's two applications. So there's two of them. You use the first one, you wait 30 to 50 seconds to see if there's any response. If there's no response, then you could use the second one. And we would always suggest at the same time doing chest compressions. Yes. Okay. And rescue breaths if you feel comfortable doing rescue breaths. Okay. But I've administered naloxone 6 times in my career. And it's been amazing that the fact that it works and it brings someone back to life.
That's amazing. And where do you get it?
Any of the drug and alcohol services that provide drug treatment. So, for example, in Humankind, if you came up to,
but can you get it online
you can, in some parts of the UK, you can order it online.
Okay.
But we would always suggest going into a treatment provider.
Okay.
And also, a lot of prisons now will release you with an naloxone kit. So a lot are given a kit at the gate. It's in a yellow box, and yeah, it saves people's lives. And for me, it's not just about people who use drugs. Everyone should carry naloxone. There's lots of work and lots of police authorities are looking at it at the moment. There's a whole government initiative around increasing the amount of people that carry naloxone in the public sector. But yeah, it's so important. And so I would always say to like friends and family, loved ones,
just get one,
just
carry
go
one.
in, get a kit. It takes 15, 20 minutes and it literally can save somebody's life.
Excellent.
Really, it's so impactful.
Okay, John. So I was going to ask you, so Chris is some way along his journey for recovery post-prison. How do the support services work and how can you access help?
So if it was me, I would literally Google who is my provider in the local area. And if it's us, if it's Humankind, then you simply ring up or you turn up at our buildings where our opening times, everything's put online. And if you go onto Humankind's website, you can search through there and see if we're one of the services. And if we're not, it will point you in the direction of who the service is.
Great.
And just turn up and have an honest conversation about where you are in your recovery journey. And then there'll be a pathway for that. And it might be there's other mutual aid. There might be some other groups. There might be some things like drink coach. So if somebody's substance is alcohol, there's quite a lot of online apps that you can actually have as well to help.
Okay.
So there's one called Drink Coach, which is really good. There's one Breaking Free Online, and the NHS has one called Lower My Drinking app.
Okay.
And these all help people in terms of managing some of their use, managing some of their behaviors. So Breaking Free Online, for example, you can put in where you used to pick up drugs or alcohol from into a map, and it's a live thing on your smartphone.
Okay.
So you start wandering back down a certain way and it pings you a message and says, you're heading towards such and such. Do you want a different route? And it gives you a different route round.
That's great.
That's awesome.
And so, yeah, I think I'd love it to do it for cream cakes for me. Because that'd be the one for me now. But I think those are some of the old behaviours and some of the things that can trip people up.
Yeah. No, definitely. We agree with that.
So in terms of, you touched on quite a few things there. And those apps that you mentioned, we'll put those in the description and the show notes so you can find out where those are. I just want to take you back a bit because you mentioned something about, asking for help doesn't mean you failed. Because, some people might see that as, you know what, I've basically gone wrong here. But it's actually a sign of strength, right?
I think asking for help is so important. And I also think offering help and being kind is also just so important. And I guess for the work I do and for the organisation I work for, I'm really passionate about the fact that you will get kindness from us. And so it is hard to ask. And like I said before, it doesn't mean that you failed. It's hard to ask for help. You are programmed not to a certain degree. And everyone, a lot of the time, I think back probably about my lived experience of things, and looking back to my parents, and if I'd have said to my parents, I'm really struggling with such and such, I could imagine my mother being on tender hooks for ages about,
what's he
this
doing?
I'm going to watch him a bit closer for a lot longer now. And that probably would have irritated me and probably made me push back against that side of things. But I think if you can ask for help, and it's about honesty, you've got to be honest. You've got to be honest with yourself about where you are, about what you're struggling with. And once you can do that, then you can sit with those feelings, and you've got other people who help support you with that.
Yeah.
And it's okay to feel vulnerable and to crave taking drugs and crave alcohol. It's about whether you act upon that or not.
Acting upon that urge, right?
And coming up with coping strategies and mechanisms, and having that group, that support around you, that village of people who I can think, I'm really struggling. I'll give Jules a call, give Zak a call. I can't, and reaching out.
Yeah.
And knowing that that's okay and that you feel validated from it.
And I'm glad you touched on the group structure, because like Chris mentioned earlier, and I think you touched on it briefly, that, AA and NA is not for him. So what other groups are available then?
So different things are run in different parts of the country. But so, for example, we work very closely with the Well communities in Cumbria, and they deliver lots of mutual aid support work. And there's lots of things that are based on smart recovery, and other ways of working. But lots of it is around that mutual aid support idea of, we will support you. We are in this together. And lots of people with lived experience who understand a lot of the struggles. Don't get me wrong. I think everybody's recovery journey is entirely theirs.
Yes.
And it's entirely individual.
Yes.
And just because one person's done it one way doesn't mean
that's the way
that
for
will
you,
work
right? Yeah.
for you. But there is something really powerful about talking to somebody
who's been on that journey,
who has been through those struggles and had those feelings in their stomach and had their mind racing and thinking, and had all those little voices in their head telling them, well, you could do this. No one will know about that. And it's only a bit. And you could probably cope with just doing that for a bit now. And just one go of that will be all right. And, that's okay. Who's had all them voices, all those little things, those permissions that happen, and those things that we tell ourselves, all the rubbish and all the lies that we internally tell ourselves when we want something. If I want a cake, I will have a really good day, and then I can reward myself by having a cake.
Yeah.
Or I'll have a really bad day and I'll console myself by having a cake. I just want a cake.
I hear you.
I don't care. I've told all that story in my head just so that I can give myself permission to do that. I do the same thing with drugs, the same thing with gambling, do the same thing with alcohol.
Okay. So it's just about, realizing those triggers, right?
Yeah. And also thinking, I don't want to listen to that voice. I want to listen to a different voice. I'm going to ring somebody and say, I've had these thoughts. And this person who's on the other end of the phone might say, right, okay, I understand that. Why don't we talk about this? Why don't we look at that?
Great. And leading on from that, I wanted to ask, what else would someone who needs support, like on the recovery journey, someone like Chris, who's maybe a little bit further on in their journey, what else would you say to them? What else would you give? What other advice would you give?
I'm a really big advocate for kind of volunteering and doing peer mentoring work. So being in a service, volunteering, doing stuff in recovery, because it keeps you plugged into lots of other people who are also on that recovery journey. And I think people go back to the idea of kindness. And I think when you can deliver something where you're being kind to people who perhaps are really struggling at that time and maybe further away from their recovery and still actively taking drugs, it helps build your strength to know that you're helping people. Because I think when we take drugs, we can be quite destructive and burn a lot of bridges and, in my personal experience, be quite selfish and just be in it for me. And so to actually do things for the kindness and for the good of somebody else, it's really rewarding. And we're just launching at the moment, we're launching a peer educator program around Naloxone. So people who are still actively in drug treatment will be going out, giving out Naloxone kits to other people who are perhaps not even in treatment.
That's a great idea.
Do you think that would be quite hard for people? So say, being around people either still using drugs or still drinking, do you think it will be hard though?
I think if you're very early in your recovery, it sometimes can be really hard, and it can be hard further down in your recovery.
I can definitely see how it would be really good as well. I'm just wondering if it would also be like quite hard.
But I think what you've also got is you've got certainly in Humankind, you've got an entire group of staff who are there to support you as well. If you're volunteering or you're a peer mentor, you've got a whole treatment provision service. You've got recovery coordinators,
so maybe even
team
extra
leaders,
support,
loads
kind
of other
around
people
that,
who will be checking in to make sure you're okay with that. And if there's a really tough day one day, you've got load more people to go and talk to about having that as a tough day.
So it can, in essence, strengthen your network, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the other things, I guess, looking at people who've come out of prison, as a sector, working in substance misuse, we really support lots of people with lived experience, and we expect people to have, a lot of the time, things on their DBS, and it does not stop them from working and progressing within an organisation like Humankind.
That's a really important thing to say as well, like, because, you know, it's not a blockage for people out there that want to go into the sector still and, you know, want to be able to do those things still.
And we need more people with lived experience. The voice of the people with lived experience is so important in all parts of drug treatment, because
100%.
it's really, you know, we want to learn and want to harvest, I guess, and harness all that information about how people went through treatment, so that when we offer those treatment options, we can tailor that to people and make sure that it's trauma informed, and make sure that we're meeting people where they need to be, kind of thing. And I think, like I say, I always go back to the fact that I feel really privileged to do my job. And my job is a real act of kindness. So I work with lots of people and do lots of pieces of work where people are still using drugs, and life is really, really tough for a great number of those people. And to be valued, to be treated kindly, to not be judged, to not have stigma attached, is really important. And I always hope that if I do nothing else, somebody comes and meets me, then they go away feeling happier than when they started. Then I've done something good at that point.
Love that.
And I think that's where all recovery starts from. I think all recovery starts from an act of kindness, someone feeling valued.
Yeah. So John, so thank you for that, John. Really, really well spoken, and I love that point that we just left on. So I just wanted to invite you to just recap on the main points of advice that you gave everyone.
Thank you. I think acknowledging that it's really difficult. I think for me, the biggest point from a harm reduction is get a Naloxone kit. Go into a service, ask for a Naloxone kit. If you don't want to carry one with needles, ask for nasal spray. It takes 15 minutes maximum to get trained how to use one, and you potentially are going to be able to save somebody's life. And if it's not your life, then it could be somebody else, one of your loved ones, somebody you know. It could be a perfect stranger in the street, but what a real act of kindness being able to save someone's life. If you want support, get on the internet and Google who is your provider. If it's one that's Humankind, then all our services are listed in terms of what's available, when the opening times, everything's online. And a lot of the time there is a contact phone number that people can ring. A lot of those numbers are 24 hours a day.
Oh, great.
There's lots of apps available. So there's Drink Coach, Breaking Free Online, and various other apps that are out there that are around helping people change some of their behavior or some of the craving management side of things. Asking for help doesn't mean you've failed. It's a position of strength. And also, I'd say if you lapse, if you go back and you use drugs, it's not too late to ask for help at that point. Rather than thinking, oh, well, I'm in it now, I might as well carry on. You might have a blip, and that's okay. Services are there to help support you and to help kind of make you more resilient and build that recovery capital side of things. Volunteering, giving something back, I think is really important. And it's also a really good way of getting into the sector and being part of the employed workforce. And that's really important for lots of people who perhaps been through the prison system, and where feel like perhaps their previous convictions have stopped them from doing certain types of work, then the drug and alcohol field is really open to people with lived experience, and that voice of people with lived experience is so important. And as an organisation, I guess Humankind, we're really committed to hearing that voice and working with people with lived experience to make sure that the services we deliver create meaningful and long-term recovery.
Yeah, love that.
Amazing. Thank you so much. You have shared so much information for everybody. So we really, really appreciate that. We're going to list a few more organisations that hopefully can help with your road to recovery. But before we do, John, would you like to say anything more about your organisation, Humankind?
Sure. I mean, we do deliver drug and alcohol substance misuse services, but we also have housing, family intervention programs up and down the country. So, I know that housing can be really difficult for people coming out of prison sometimes. And a lot of the housing we deliver is abstinence-based housing. So if you're in recovery and you're trying to maintain that recovery, then look at it up and see what town or what city you're in to see if Humankind deliver any of the housing services there, because they're up and down the country.
So thank you so much for that, John. We are just going to list a few more. So we have We Are With You, Nelson Trust, Change, Grow, Live, Turning Point, and Kaleidoscope.
And we'll include all of the links to these organisations and apps mentioned previously in the podcast description. But if you've heard anything that's inspired you to reach out for support from this episode, please get in touch and let us know. Or if you just fancy getting in touch with us to letting us know about your road to recovery, please get in touch by DMing us on Twitter and Instagram at AfterPrisonPod. Or you can send an email to us at podcast@prison.radio. Or if you'd like, you can write to us at Life After Prison, National Prison Radio, HMP Brixton, London, SW2 5XF.
So a massive thank you to John and to Chris for sending in his voice clip. So don't forget to check out our other Getting Out episodes. We cover things like accommodation, health and confidence, and also our other podcast, The Sit Down. So check it out. We've got wicked guests from all walks of life discussing and sharing their experience and journeys of life after prison.
If you've heard anything that you think will be useful for anyone, please share this episode with them. And we hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.